welcome to the Unmuted Podcast. My name is Jeff, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things HR, talent, HR tech, world of work, anything under the sun that has to do with, the workplace, accessibility, diversity, inclusion, and so on. And so we drop new episodes every week on Thursdays. Normally, we did take a bit of a break. But we are going to be dropping new ones, every Thursday morning. And the episodes live on our website at GoScaleHR.com. Also on our YouTube channel. So the channel is starting to grow a little bit. So if you haven't already done so, hit that subscribe button so that you can get notified when a new video has dropped. Also share comments. So I want to hear from you. I've spent 25 years of my career trying to bring people together to learn. And the only way that you can do that is by asking questions and sharing thoughts. So I encourage all of you to do that publicly on our, whether it's LinkedIn, on YouTube, and so on. This is a really good episode. So, and it's called Tech Without Limits, Ensuring Accessibility for All in the Tech Sector. So obviously my own personal story, I'm hard of hearing, and so accessibility has been a big part of my work and my personal life since I was born. This is going to be a really good one, and so we have a fantastic guest, Elaine Butler, who's going to join us shortly. But first, I just want to make just a couple of key points just to frame the conversation first. Obviously we're talking about accessibility, tech, people, and so on. And so one point that that I've been making quite a bit over the last couple months is technology is continuing its trend upward in terms of like it's important in our lives, and I think that's sort of a given. I use my phone. I just got a new Galaxy Samsung watch, so I'm totally connected 24/7, and I think it's just how we interact in life has changed quite a bit. Technology has shaped how we work, the way we work, whether it's communication and live. And so, but with all of this innovation and an explosion, obviously there's still underrepresented groups that are not just for having access to products, services, and places of work. It's a complicated problem. It's complicated. I'm not going to minimize that, but I think obviously we need to be really cognizant in this day and age that we need to be inclusive of everyone. And then one thing about disabilities, which is really interesting, and I've done a lot of talks on this recently in the last couple of years, is that more than 25% of our population self-identifies as having a disability, whether it's visible or not. And so 25%, so think about it. I mean, Canada, we just passed just over 40 million people, so that's a lot of people. That's 6 million people right there. And if you look in your organizations, there are a lot of people that have self-identify. So it's really interesting that obviously when you're looking at accessible workplaces, it needs to be fully embedded into HR strategy, business strategy, and so on, because all of your employees and customers are all part of that group. The other comment that I want to make is improving accessibility is not easy. We can talk about it, we can write about it, we can argue about it, but it's really not easy because it takes work. It takes the commitment and will, and Elaine Butler is going to help us break it all down, and she's going to help us to figure out some of the strategies, some of the tips on how to make the tech sector more accessible. So, Sydney, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeff.
Before we get into our questions and the actual episode, can you give us a bit of an overview of what you do?
What do I do? I feel like I wear so many hats in a day.
It's a loaded question. You only have 30 seconds. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
What's the time limit? No, so as you can see, I'm the founder of Accessible Crates, and I started that in 2021. And within that, I also am an HR consultant and / diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility consultant. I've also recently added becoming a neurodiversity and a disability employment coach. So helping people understand how they can be accommodated in the workplace or one-on-one, like for job seekers when they get a job offer, saying, okay, what accommodation can they actually ask for? And then once they're actually in the organization working with the employer as an add-on to the neurodivergent and disabled employees that might need a little bit more support and coaching in certain areas. And as an HR and diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility consultant, really looking at policies and procedures, looking at job descriptions, going into companies, providing training to really understand how to better support accessibility across all industries and all sectors.
Perfect. Thank you. Obviously, you're quite busy. I know that you're, doing many things, which is kind of like me a little bit. One thing I've learned in life is to try to scale down the number of things that you tend to commit to. And I'm 45 years old, and I still have that problem. So I'm not overly great at saying no. But anyway, okay. So this topic is all about accessibility in the tech sectors. I guess the first natural question would be, what is your definition of accessibility?
Yeah, I think my definition of accessibility is that it's for basically providing resources so everyone can have access. It's synonymous, with supporting people with disabilities and making sure people with disabilities have access. But in my mind, it allows everyone to have access. And looking at, design of products or services and environments, everyone can use it independently and get the most out of it as possible.
And so I know, I've been around for a long time. So, back in the old days, when we talked about accessibility, the first thing that always came to mind was, physical access to a space, right? So, the wheelchair accessibility, which is the first thing that really comes to mind. But obviously now with that technology, just, playing a role in every part of our life, it's much more than that. And so, why is it important to make a tech company accessible, but also, not only companies, but also tech products and services? Why is it really important?
Yeah, I think a lot of times the tech sector or any sector think that for their customer base or the client base to be able to reach as many target markets as possible is why it's important. But it's also important for your employees, because when your employees feel accommodated or feel like it's an accessible place, then they'll actually transfer more to making your products and services better in the tech sector and allow you to look at, okay, how can we utilize tech to improve people's lives, and what does that look like? What problems are currently not being solved? How can we become an innovator or inventor in this space? And really understand that tech has its problems, it has its issues, but at the heart of it, it has to be the human aspect. Because as humans, we're the ones using this tech, and, understanding that, the robots of the future and the AI is a huge part of the tech space right now, but really understanding these stem from wanting to make humans' lives better and improving our quality of life. So what does that actually look like? And understanding that when you at the heart of understanding, okay, what is accessibility? How can I make as many people access my products and be able to use my products independently and without much support? How is that bettering someone's life?
Do you think the tech sector is under more scrutiny and pressure, to be accessible, on all fronts than other sectors are? Because I get that feeling sometimes. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think because again, the tech sector at the forefront, it's trying to improve our lives and improve our day-to-day communications and how we interact with the world. So I think to make sure it's accessible, and kind of has to be, it's kind of under so much scrutiny and there's so much more legislation around, okay, where's the fine line between, bettering someone's life and taking over someone's life, And so I think really understanding that, okay, what can we do to make it more accessible and reach and help people's lives and not overstep our boundaries when it comes to this.
Yeah, okay. So my next question, just a follow-on question to that, why do workplaces in the tech sector need to be more accessible?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, there's so many different, for example, I'll talk about neurodiversity for a quick second, which is under the umbrella of accessibility, because a lot of times, people that are autistic or neurodivergent, working in that tech sector, and a lot of people think that tech is the end all be all for neurodivergent folks. So that's not the case. But allowing for having those different brains and those different perspectives to think outside of the norm and think outside of the conventional way of thinking. There's no right way of thinking and understanding the world, but understanding that when you're more accessible, when you're open to understanding that everyone's different and the little details make people different is so important. And how to better understand that if you have your product and servicing people with diverse needs, you have to be able to do that in the workplace and start with your employees and have that trickle down effect.
Yeah, I mean, there was an old saying that to serve the market, you must employ the market, right? So I think that is more prevalent probably in a Western country like Canada. Obviously Canada, Canada is probably the most multicultural country on planet Earth. And so just by virtue of our demographics and population, I think that it's much more at the forefront in terms of those dynamic. Accessibility is a little different because there are so many things that make it different in terms of uh, disabilities. And so take like me for example. I always use me as an example because I can speak to my own experiences. I'm hard of hearing. You can have 5 Jeffs in the room, and all of us have the same level of hearing loss. But what actually accommodates each one of us is can be quite different. So you can't just take a blanket process or policy or whatever, way of, accommodating somebody like me and just make it like a blanket for all hard of hearing people. So it adds a lot of layers of complexity and, difficulty to, equations, not just cut and dry. So I'm just wondering, can you list a few ways or strategies to make the tech sector more accessible?
Yeah, I think like you were just alluding to in your point that like having an accommodation policy is kind of like the first step almost because okay, duty to accommodate. What does that look like? But really understanding that everyone is going to be different accommodation. Again, if someone that's autistic can have very different accommodations to what I need, and it can also look different every day. Depending on other factors. And so just understanding that, I think being more flexible and in your policies and procedures and in your protocols, not being so rigid is a huge strategy. And by still having that strategy in place and having it documented, but being able to understand that it can vary and it can look different, and being able to have training on accessibility and what does that look like for both your products and your services and for your coworkers and your employees. And really understanding that and innovation as a tool for accessibility and, kind of reframing that, understanding that, again, the AI, I remember when it first came out, that's a huge example of tech that I think everyone's talking about right now. It's going to be talked about for a while. But I was kind of apprehensive at it first. But I was reading all these articles. Oh, it's so beneficial for neurodivergent folks. And I was like, yeah. And then I came across one that I actually liked and was like, okay, I understand it. Using tools and reframing it. It's like, it's not, because I think, in the tech sector, sometimes things can be taken out of context or, not really fully understood, but really understanding, okay, what is the goal of this? And really understanding what is the end result we want to have for our users in this tech sector, and understanding that it might, and also considering ways that it might be used that you didn't think of before, and also consulting with people that are neurodivergent that have disabilities that might be interacting with your products and seeing, it's like, hey, is it doing what it was intended to do to better help you? Or is it having the reverse effect? What does it actually look like in actuality? And having user testers.
Yeah, I think to your point about having some flexibility with policy. I mean, obviously you want to as the company grows and gets bigger. I'm talking about the smaller companies, but I typically work with. Obviously as you get larger and you have more people, we need to have more process in place is greater. But having said that, I think the mindset needs to be that if you do come across a situation where the policy doesn't work, then the organization has to be willing and able and ready to pivot and sort of react to that. And so how do you do that? And really it's just a matter of saying, look, we are trying to make this accessible, But we don't know everything, and so this is our first time going through something like this. So to help us along, right? How do we do that? And I think if you sort of keep communication lines open, and you're coming at it from a genuine perspective, then I think that's a good way to go. Because I always tell people it's impossible to be an expert on every single possible disability, like
Intersectionality.
intersectionality challenge that may come up. I can't even say the word. And so, if you think that you can be an expert, you're really, blowing smoke, right? But I wanted to ask you about AI, because I always ask, because I love AI, and obviously it's gone crazy in the last, about a year and a half or so. So, what's your point of view on, AI as it relates to accessibility?
I think it can be such a powerful tool for accessibility, but again, having, especially in a workplace, or having those regulations around it and those laws, and understanding that, okay, what does it actually look like to use AI? What is, because I think when AI first talking about, like, especially ChatGPT, people are like, oh, that's plagiarism, and because it's taking something out of the content. And so it's like, where is the fine line? Defining those parameters. And so I found this one called Goblin Tools. I don't know if you've heard of it. And it's like, just sometimes when I write a proposal to a potential client, using that to spruce it up a little bit, to make it more professional, And so I think it could be such a powerful tool because sometimes I have a habit of typing like I speak, even though I know better.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's just like tired or in a rush. And so then putting it through that tool, I was like, oh, that sounds better and sounds more formal. And so it makes that easier for me and better communicates what I'm trying to get across to my potential clients or even my clients. But also, I'm transparent and open to them that, hey, it's still my ideas, it's still my thoughts, but I just had a little polishing done, using AI. And I think being transparent when it is being used, and it's like or having that even as an accommodation in the workplace. What does that look like? Oh, I'm doing a report. I don't really like reports, or my writing style isn't as suited to reports. So using ChatGPT to better enhance that, and just being, again, what are those parameters? What does it actually look like in theory and in actuality? And not just sticking with the theory, because it's still really new, but still knowing, okay, where do you draw the line? Where is it acceptable to use AI in these different instances?
Yeah, I think those are all just excellent questions that I think all of us are sort of grappling with, and I think we're sort of moving at a real time. Obviously we're sort of figuring that out as we go. I personally think that it's a game changer, and because I think if we view it, if our mindset is that AI can be augmenting, the work that we do much more quickly, so enhances our speed and so forth. But having said that, we still need to understand how it can be exclusionary, possibly. And I don't think there's any answers for that yet. But I think we need to go as sort of take it as we go, and constantly having that mindset of, okay, so we need to make sure that we're actually accessible and that including everybody. So we need to constantly be asking ourselves that question. So, for example, like a chatbot, right? So I have a client that's using a chatbot now for, like HR inquiries, right? So some employees may not be able to type, but they can use voice to text to use it. So they're playing around with that kind of functionality just to make sure that people who, may not have use of their hands, can actually, access the tool. That's the kind of thought process. But it's really interesting. I think, look, we can have this conversation every month, and we'll have a different conversation because I think, because that's how fast it's changing. If viewers can learn one thing about what you talked about today, so what would that one thing be?
I think that accessibility, kind of like AI, is ever changing with the person, with the circumstances. And so just being open to be flexible and really understand that as long as you're coming from a place of genuine curiosity and care for the individual, then you're on the right track. Understanding that you're going to make mistakes. And like you said about the policies, like things change. You're learning alongside that this is your first time doing the policy X, Y, and Z, or Z because we're Canadian. And so really understanding that being transparent, I think a lot of times managers, human resources, like I have to be perfect all the time and be able to support and help my employees. But sometimes it looks like admitting that you made a mistake, that you're still learning, because we're all human. We're not robots. And so just being open and transparent that you're trying your best and you want them to try their best and to meet them where they're at.
I think that, excellent advice. So I just want to thank you for being here and sharing your expertise and insights. And so once again, this podcast, Unmuted Podcast, is all things HR, talent, HR tech, world of work, accessibility, you name it. And we have guests on our show, and like all of our guests are experts in various fields, whether they're practicing HR, talent, HR tech, diversity, inclusion, and so on. So Sydney, I want to thank you for being here.